Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my coverage of the 2025 Gaithersburg Book Festival. I'm filming this a little later than I intended to, but in my real time as I'm filming, perhaps this is the best time, which I think I'll get to that explanation a little bit later in the video. But anyway, the Gaithersburg Book Festival is a mid-sized book festival put on the Maryland outskirts of Washington, D.C. It's held in this beautiful park in Gaithersburg. There are authors who come in for various ages and various genres. And we also have local groups who set up, meet and greet tables, to talk about their books or their organizations. And we have the Friends of the Library used book sale. We have a lot of activities for kids. It is a whole lot of fun. I've been whining for an entire year because last year I missed the festival because I caught the COVID. But now I suppose I should move on at long last. I'm in a new cycle. That being said, if I could go back, maybe I'd do things a little differently. I did enjoy my time at the festival, although as I was trying to get there, I realized that I didn't quite have my knack of which buses I should take to get there, and I was walking away as the one I wanted came up, so whoops. But I did get there in plenty of time, and in fact I got there in time to go to a writer's workshop that a local writing group, the Writer Center, put on. It was with this published novelist, and she was talking about ways to sort of craft revision processes, and maybe I'll be talking about this more in an upcoming AuthorTube video. Here too is this year's schedule and pamphlet, and I feel like the writing was much bigger and maybe even easier to follow than I remember in other years. And here's a nice map of the area. It was really very pretty. And so I did enjoy walking around, and I even got a couple of savory caprices, maybe overpriced, but that kind of goes with the territory, but I got them from a food truck. I went to the used books sale under the pavilion. I even met up with a friend and one of her friends who was a children's author and panelist that day, so that was pretty great as well. And now what I have is just a little bit of bee footage that I thought I'd share with you to hopefully give you the ambiance. So here we go. I do wish I did more of, and I think I get a lot out of it, is go to more author panels. I ended up only going to 1.5. One I was sort of on the outskirts of. It was Janine Cummins, who actually grew up in the Gaithersburg area and then became infamous with her book American Dirt. And this is the latest book she's published after American Dirt, which I think gets a bit into her Puerto Rican family. So I was on the outskirts listening to that. And then I more deliberately went to a panel featuring an author who I wanted to get her book signed. This is The Anatomy of Exile by Zeeva Bukai. It and all of the paneled authors were being sold by Politics and Prose, which is our sort of big little bookstore in the Washington, D.C. area. And indeed, I got the book signed. And as always with authors, I have to be a little bit awkward as I approach them and think about what to say. And in this case, I decided to be a little more raw and real than I usually am, because this, I think, might have been my first Israeli author event that I've gone to in person since October 7th, and I have been tracking in my monthly literary newsletter the reception of Jews and Zionists and Israelis, as they, attempt to, attend literary events ever since October 7th. So it was interesting to talk to her about her experiences with both finishing up the edits of this book during October 7th and what it's been like since then as the book has come into publication. This book is about an Israeli family that leaves Israel and moves to America, and it takes place in between the 67 war and the 72 war, and there are Palestinian characters involved as well. I didn't realize how harrowing it would be to talk to her about these issues when a week later, living in the DC area, 2 Israeli staff members were murdered coming out of a Jewish event taking place at a museum, the Capitol Jewish Museum, that I absolutely love. And I intend to go to their special exhibit about LGBTQ Jews next month. So things are feeling pretty raw right now for me, and I hope it's not controversial to say on my small fry booktube channel that I hope that literature remains a place where we can maybe get away from some of the extremism of the outside world and actually learn to consider one another through literature. And on that note, I will leave you with snippets of Zeeva Bukai at this festival, at this panel, talking about her book, The Anatomy of Exile.
Hi, I'm Zeeva Bukai, and my novel is The Anatomy of Exile. And it's the story of an Israeli family that immigrates to the United States in 1967 after the Six-Day War, after the death of a beloved sister in what appears to be a terror attack, but is in fact a love affair between an Israeli woman and a Palestinian man that ends in tragedy. And that begins the story. The story is really an immigrant story, how this family tries to assimilate into American life, into what is then, back in the 60s, the melting pot of America. And while her children and her husband seem to be doing this in an okay way, mostly, she has great difficulty. She wants to go home, to where she was born, to where she feels that she belongs, and where her identity is placed and rooted. And then a Palestinian family moves into the apartment upstairs from their Brooklyn apartment. And her daughter Ruby, who was 17 years old at the time, falls in love with a Palestinian son named Faisal. And Tamar, the protagonist, does everything in her power to break this relationship up because she is terrified that Ruby is going to end like her sister-in-law. And essentially, the story moves between, as I said, 67 all the way up to 1973, the Yom Kippur War. And this is really a story about a woman's growth and how she grows and changes and discovers herself and her own identity. And that's basically it. So I felt that this family is almost taken out of time and placed in America during what was a rather euphoric period in Israel at the time, until 73. So Also, I felt that this was something that I could write about. This was a period of time that my parents knew well. This was a period of time that I understood. Very different from today. We won't get into that. But I felt like I had grown up in the 60s and 70s. And so it was a place of knowledge for me, a place that I felt comfortable to talk about, especially here in the United States, as well as Israel. So that was basically the reason. So Tamar is an Ashkenazi woman, which means that she was born in Israel, but her parents are from Eastern Europe, and they leave before the Second World War and go to Israel. Her husband, Salim Abadi, is a Syrian Jew from Damascus in an area called Haret El Yahud, which is basically, it just means the Jewish quarter. Jews in Damascus have been there for over 2,000 years. It is a very ancient Jewish community. There are no Jews left in Syria, by the way, anymore. And there were many, many thousands. Salim is basically, he's Middle Eastern. He comes from that part of the world. He's definitely this macho patriarch. And she is definitely a woman who, has a very traditional role in her family. She is mother, she is wife, she is the domestic caretaker, basically meaning the housewife. She does a lot of cleaning, she does a lot of cooking. She's definitely part of the domestic sphere. And yet, this is, in a sense, even though she is in her later 30s here, this is, in a sense, a coming-of-age novel for her, of where she makes her own discoveries about who she is and how she, and who she hopes to be. So, I think the time frame was really important for this. I've gotten a lot of, questions about Tamar as, why does she behave the way she does? And my answer is because this is the way women behaved at the time. This was the role they had for, especially women who weren't necessarily educated. I mean, she has a high school diploma, but she never went to college. There was never any question that she would learn anything or do anything beyond being a mother. And one of the things so Tamar's father was a photographer for a specific newspaper in Tel Aviv. And when she gets a little older, when she's a teenager, she starts making these tapestries. And they're actually being her mother actually gets them into a particular store, and they are sold, and she's maybe 14 or 15 years old. And she leaves when she marries Salim, and I just want to emphasize that this was considered at that time a mixed marriage. This was not necessarily an acceptable marriage. Tamar's mother was not happy about this marriage. She calls Salim an Ariba Shahid, which in Yiddish actually means an Arab Jew. He identifies as an Arab Jew as well. And she begins to pick this up again, these tapestries, these needle points, when she gets to America. She kind of rediscovers that. And in a sense, it feels to her as if she were recreating things in her own life. There's certain plot things that I don't want to give away, but there's one point of where she actually tears up a postcard that Salim has sent her and begins sewing it into the tapestry of a Degas, it's a tapestry of a Degas painting. And she dreams of doing this as well, this idea that she has sewn her own eyes shut. So it becomes this kind of metaphor that is both exploratory and a way for her own self-expression, the way that she's feeling. And it's all kind of in the color and in the thread and the way she separates the thread and threads the needle, and all of this becomes this kind of ritual almost for her.
And that about covers it for me now. I will leave a link to the Gaithersburg Book Festival, to the Anatomy of Exile, and to my Friends children's book listed down below for your convenience if you're interested. I hope to be back on this channel relatively imminently with an AM reading video. We just got out of a holiday weekend here in the US, and I hope you got a lot of reading in if you were taking advantage of it. I also hope that if you are enjoying literary festivals or other literary events and want to talk about them, I'd love to hear about them. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.